Okay, Terry, if you want to begin.
Okay, I'm turning myself on. Josh, ready? Here we go. Hi, everybody. I am Terry Tazioli with University Bookstore in Seattle. Glad to have you with us this evening to spend some time, like real virtual time, with John Moe, writer, commentator, broadcaster, really funny guy. He's in a closet, and now author of The Hilarious World of Depression. I'm sure lots of you know about John and his work. And if you do, you know about his struggles with depression, and you know about the humor and the openness that get him through. We're happy to have him with us this evening, and we're happy to have his special guest, Bill Radke of Seattle's KUOW Radio. Bill's a broadcaster, show host, comedian, and writer. Jenny Lawson. Jenny's a New York Times best-selling author, a journalist, and you may know her as the bloggess. And Neko, singer, musician, songwriter, with a long list of credits. And we're happy to have all of you with us also. This is great. This is University Bookstore's 120th anniversary, believe it or not. We're the oldest bookstore in Washington State. We're pretty proud of that, and we're grateful to all of you for your support. A couple things before we launch into this great event. You can order John Moe's book through our website at ubookstore.com. You can either have it mailed to you, or if you're in the area, if you're in our region, you can pick it up curbside at our store. And you're welcome to submit questions for John anytime this evening by using the chat function on Zoom. And it's somewhere, it's over there, so you can find it. Once the presentation's over, we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. And finally, this event's being recorded, so you can watch it again and again and again. You can pass it along if you'd like. And yes, you are all muted. I will be muted to help prevent any interruptions while John and his guests are talking. So there you go. Have a good time, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us. Here's John Moe.
Am I on? Am I here? Okay. I'm going to assume that I am on the screen right now. I'm just going to go ahead and enable the chat function to make sure of that. Hello, everyone. Can you just confirm for me that I'm being heard on this thing? I am on. Good. I'm so glad. Hi. I am in, as Terry said, my closet, which is also my studio, my recording studio, my office, and a lot of other things. As a depressed person, it's really hard having an office that's right next to the bed, because I want to take naps, but I'm not. It's been a really, really hard day in St. Paul, Minnesota. As you know, there was a murder by the police of a Black man in Minneapolis, and the protests have been raging. And it's quite a thing when the news of the world is focused on the riot or near riot or potential riot that's going on at the store up the road where you do most of your grocery shopping. And I haven't prepared what I was going to say about that, except that it's all about despair, I think. We live in these times where that's an event of despair for people who've observed it. It's a different sort of despair for people of color in my community, and I think a lot of communities. And I'm looking for hope, and I think we're all looking for hope. And if we can't find hope, maybe the hope is in the constantly searching for hope. And I just wanted to make sure to say something about what's going on. I follow in these things the same path that I do for the interviews on the Hilarious World of Depression podcast, which is I don't really plan much in advance. I kind of go in with what's on my mind and let the conversation go from here. Usually there's another person in the conversation, but for now, it's me talking alone in my closet, and then seeing various names of people from my past on this grid in front of me, like a sort of historical fever memory of the Brady Bunch. uh, where Cindy and Jan and Peter are all played by like people I went to college with and my wife's friends. So hi, oh, and my former bosses also I think are on here. So that's great. Thank you to the University Bookstore for having me for this. When my sister graduated from the University of Washington in 1980, my oldest sister, and I used to go up there when I was like, 8 years old, 9 years old. And whenever we would go to the University Bookstore, that's where I felt like I was at my classiest. And when I worked at KUOW right up the street from there many years later, that's the first place I was recognized. Somebody recognized my voice and said, "Oh, you're from KUOW." And I'm like, that's public radio hardcore around here. So it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to be part of this event. And it was crushing when I knew that I couldn't be there in person, but safety is safety, and that's the right thing to do. So I'm glad to be here in the new Zoom reality. I'm going to read a little bit about the book, and I'm going to bring some friends out. So this book got started arguably with Otto von Bismarck in 19th century Germany, who affected laws such that there was an uprising and a rebellion and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which led to World War I, which led to World War II, which led to the Nazi invasion of Norway in World War II, which my parents were young children during. And they finally got to America after they grew up and kind of took their trauma with them. And my dad drank because that's what therapy was at that point in history. There wasn't a lot of great opportunities to go seek counseling and engage in cognitive behavioral therapy in post-war Europe. And so he addressed it the same way men of his generation did, which was cigarettes and booze. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful father, and he had a disorder related to alcohol. The vexing thing is I don't know if that's what caused my own depressive disorder. All I know is this was a thing that emerged in junior high down in Federal Way, Washington at Sacagawea Junior High. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I didn't know what it was. And there's a lot in this book about what that feels like when the bottom falls out of your soul and you're like 13 and you don't know what's going on. It's terrifying. But I knew that I had to keep it a secret because I had never heard of anything like this happening to anybody. So I kept it a secret. I didn't tell anybody. And then I just learned to kind of swallow it up as I went along and keep it a secret. And it wasn't until my mid-30s when things were just boiling over enough that I finally went to a doctor to ask what was going on. And I fully expected that doctor to say, "No, you're just a weirdo." These bouts of rage you have, this sort of absence of from life that you have, that's just you. You're just strange that way. Better shut up about it. But to find out that then I had a disorder, I had a thing. I wasn't that thing. I had a thing, and I had it for decades. Was a tremendous relief. And so because then it could get treated, then it had a name, then it was identifiable, then it was not me being weak or bad or weird. It was a thing that had happened. And so soon after that diagnosis, I lost my brother Rick to suicide after his own long battle with depression and addiction. And when he died, after really believing that he worked for a sobriety hotline towards the end of his life after he'd gotten cleaned up from addiction to methamphetamines. And he spent all his time convincing people that their life was worth living, right? And he couldn't believe it about himself. And when he died, we have letters from him that indicate that he felt like he had done something terribly wrong, that if he was just stronger and better and didn't disappoint people so much, that this wouldn't be a problem. And he reasoned that if he was gone, everybody would appreciate that fact. And of course, no, that's not it at all. At his service, there was a lot of people who would come up to me, friends of the family, friends of my parents, who'd say, "Oh, I remember Rick when he was young, and we'd go on these camping trips, and he'd play these harmless pranks, and he was so funny and so clever." And I would say, "Yeah, that's a great memory." Also, though, you should know that he had problems in life. He was what would now probably be called ADHD or dyslexic, and what was then called being a bad kid. And he had a propensity toward addiction in his life, and he had people offer him stuff, and he took them. And that began a long, long journey through drugs for my brother. And and that led to depression. And that's there's very few addictions that don't involve depression. And he helped everybody he could, but he couldn't help himself. And that's part of his story too. And at that point, the friends of the family would kind of walk away and, go get some punch or something. But it was there that I said, you know what? If we don't talk about this stuff, there's every chance in the world it gets worse and people are gonna die. And if we do talk about it, there's a chance it could get better. It's not a guarantee, but it's a chance. If someone could get to a therapist or a psychiatrist, a family doctor, clergy, open up to a book club or a best friend, something, create a dialogue, it'll become less of an othering thing. It'll become less of a foreign body in your mind, and it can get better. So why in the world are we choosing not to talk about it? Let's talk about it. Like that's so dumb that given those two choices, our society chose silence. And I said, fine, I'll be the loudmouth. I am anyway. It's strange to be Norwegian and this extroverted. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if there was an Italian family and a mix-up somehow, but here we are. I'll be the loudmouth. And so that's what I've been doing. So I started the podcast. That became an unexpected hit, and that led to this book. Here it is. So I'm going to read to you a couple sections here. And let's see. I'm trying to... Here I am. I want to go to a different view, gallery view. I'm just seeing Terry's name in the middle of my screen, and then I'm up in a little corner. But that's okay. I've seen enough of myself here in this closet over the last several weeks. Okay, so this is from the first chapter of the book, and I'm talking about finally going to get therapy after a long time of not, and a long time of not really knowing how to do it. And I use the terms in here, normies and saddies. So normies are people who've never dealt with depression. Saddies are people who have. And I talk about my own depression, which reacts to stress. So I have a stress-triggered depression. So when things get ramped up, when there are deadlines, when the pressure's on, I fall to pieces. And so it's great that I've worked in media for 20 years. That was shrewd. All right. And yes, there's always stress in life. We all go through stuff. But the rate at which I metabolized stress into depression had gone through the roof. It was a brutally efficient machine. What do you have to be stressed about? The normies might have said, if I ever talked about these things with normal people. You have a family, a house, a car, a good job, just deal with it. As if I could simply do that, as if I chose this, as if I looked at the options available to me and they were clearly labeled perseverance and freaking the fuck out all the time. And then I calmly said, yes, I select option B. Normies and saddies are different, you see. Let's say there's a long bridge going over a high canyon. There are two cars on it. One for the normies, one for the saddies. The normies are in a big land yacht of a Buick, weighs a ton, low to the ground. When a stiff wind blows, the normies feel a mild push, but continue driving, perhaps casually noting that it's getting windy out there. Then they go back to listen to, Foo Fighters. The saddies are piled into a Model T with a sail on top of it for some reason. They see the wind coming, and it's all they can do to keep from being blown off the road and plunging into the canyon. The normies see the saddies struggle and wonder what the problem is, because to them, the wind doesn't seem that bad. Try being more positive, the normies shout, as the Saddies Model T goes tumbling off the side and the Saddies deploy the parachutes they've gotten used to wearing. I'd had good therapists in the past, briefly, but all I ever took away from therapy was a somewhat clearer understanding of how messed up I was. And that's helpful, sure, but it's not really progress. It's like knowing the brand of refrigerator you're locked in. And this was not the fault of the therapists I had seen, who were all trained pros and good at their jobs. It was my fault, or Clinny D's fault. That's our term on the show for depression sometimes. I never wanted to go all that deep in therapy because that's where the monsters were. I'm talking about the really, really bad memories, the deep bruises, the scars, the events that significantly shape a person through injury, talking about trauma. Rather than tackle the past, I was willing to settle for a tense ceasefire with it, letting my life be like Middle East countries that hate each other. There would be car bombing, sure, but a homeland is a homeland. I had gone through life with the belief, often heard in simple-minded quarters of popular psychology, that the past is the past and you just have to move on. Let it go, the simple-minded say, again, as if no one had ever tried that before. Don Henley and Glenn Frey wrote a song along these lines called Get Over It. My response song would be called Fuck Off, Don Henley and Glenn Frey, you don't know what you're talking about. I suspect most people who choose the willfully simplistic Henley method are people who've never had much unpleasant stuff in their past to begin with, because this notion is some bullshit. If you can't understand your past, then you don't really know how your mind got to where it is now, because you simply don't know yourself. Making matters worse, depression causes the saddie to lose hope. It inserts despair where hope should go, and you're left at least suspecting, if not believing in your heart, that nothing will or even could get better. So to figure things out, I mean, depression doesn't even want you to get up and take a shower and brush your teeth. So something like figuring out how your own mind works feels about as easy as taking a bus to Mars. And in the rest of that chapter, I take a bus to Mars. Through the course of the book, I do swear a lot. I'm surprised at how much I swear in the book, even after I went through the book to take out the swear words. And I should say the normies and saddies designation came about while we were when we were making the podcast, because my producer and I would talk about, well, how about John Hodgman? He's a saddie. Nope. He's a normie, says he's never dealt with it. Oh, wow. Well, then Paul F. Tompkins, he's a normie, right? No, surprisingly, a saddie. That's, so I just sort of got kind of hooked on those terms, and they're reductive, and I kind of feel bad for them, but they're catchy. All right, so a lot of things happen in the book, and I do hope you read it. So when I found out that there was going to be an event in Seattle, I figured that Bill Radke could just walk a short distance down the street from KUOW. I didn't know internet space was going to get involved, but here we are. And here he is now. Ladies and gentlemen, from KUOW, Mr. Bill Radke. Hi, Bill.
Hey, John. Good to see you. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Here's Bill. It's so great to see you here, and I want to publicly thank you for and just mildly curse you for ever getting me into this radio creativity racket in the first place.
Is it better or worse than e-greeting cards?
It's I talk a lot about my Amazon greeting card business.
Yes, you do.
In there. Bill, I wanted to ask you about sort of life in public, because in writing this book, like, there was a particularly harrowing chapter of the book that maybe 4 people knew until Terry Gross was announcing it to the world on Fresh Air. Mm-hmm. And it really made me kind of woogity. Like, how do you balance the idea of what everyone knows about you with what people don't get to know about you?
Well, I've moved on that. I have talked many times on KOW about my brother having killed himself, which I know you know about, and that happened, I don't know, 8 years ago now. And, some of the same reasons that you want to talk about things. And really, I feel like we're less and less a minority. I think you're winning, John. I think the conventional wisdom now, at least among my crowd, is let's talk about it. So I try to err on the let's talk about it. The only reason I also do rein it in is that I have kind of a big platform for how unimportant I am. I soak up a lot of airtime, and if I just gave you my opinion or my experience over and over again, it just seems like a not a healthy diet, not a diverse diet for the listener.
Yeah. On our show, we start many of the episodes with asking, is depression funny? And it's sort of at the root of, like, it's based on my doubting the entire premise of my own show. Like, have I made a terrible miscalculation?
Right.
And for me, it's funny. Like, I've arrived at this after I finished writing the book. The best analogy I can find, it's funny in the way that Groucho Marx is funny with Margaret Dumont. How, like, Margaret Dumont just wants to throw a lovely party, like a state dinner, and everyone's going to dress up nice. It'll be good for diplomacy. Like, this is going to be a wonderful evening. And here comes Groucho and his idiot friends, and they just ruin everything. And it's terrible what they're doing, but it's inescapably funny at the same time. And so I always think of
Margaret Dumont.
I think I'm Margaret Dumont, but the illness is Groucho. Like, we talked the other day about, like, personifying the illness, and I think it's more a Groucho Marx. Where do you come down on it? Because I also get lots of people yelling at me on Facebook and other places that depression is not funny.
Yeah, I love that, and we talked about that on the air, because I wondered whether you got that response. I think that well, first of all, I'm a normie, so I kind of don't get to say, but my brother did kill himself, so I get to say. It's like you're in that weird space, right? Like, I read a book.
You got a club membership.
I got a club membership, unfortunately. I read a book by a West African writer where there was a scene. I think it was Senegal. This one character says to the group that another character has killed themselves, and the response in the group is to laugh out loud, because according to this writer, in that culture tends to think of the idea of taking the one thing that we know you have, which is you have life, and that you would throw that away, is absurd and hilarious. So, and now maybe, first of all, it's a book of fiction, and maybe if the people who feel that way knew someone personally who killed themselves, it would be unfunny. But what I'm trying to say is, in some kind of cosmic sense, I think depression and suffering, like, we only get this one life. And I mean, you're guests, and you have said versions of this. You've got this one brain, and the brain is dogging you. I mean, it's kind of, it's it's sad. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So I love that question. And I was curious what you think about what do we think about calling something hilarious? Because I feel like, on one hand, if you say it's hilarious, then you're not taking it seriously. But on the other hand, our favorite entertainers like you, we love that you open that door and that you show suffering. Like, our most exalted performers are the ones who do that. So we seem of two minds about whether it's okay to call something funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky term, and the name of the show and the name of the book are both meant to be provocative, and that's why when they were designing the graphic for this, my only direction is I wanted it to look like a vaudeville sign.
Right.
There's going to be dancing tonight, we had Dick Cavett on the show, which was sort of one of those oh my god guests where you just try not to think about who you're talking to.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and he said it's more ridiculous than funny, and he said, he said the idea that like, if there was something, on a table 6 feet away that I could drink and make this thing go away forever, but I just can't get there. I just can't get up to to go across the room is inherently ridiculous. But on,
Right.
on the, and I thought too, like the riddle that I've often been with suicide is, and I talked with Cabot about this, I've talked with a few people about it, like you're in so much pain that you want it to stop. But if you do this thing, you will never feel the cessation of pain. Like Cabot said, there will be no you to feel. And it's already a barrier in so many ways. But then when I've talked to people who were in more pain, I think, than I've ever been in, they said, yeah, doesn't matter. Like, just charging right through that. And I don't know, I mean, one of my favorite interviews I did in our first season was just a very short interview with a comedian named Mike Drucker. He talked about how he had never attempted suicide because his depression told him he would screw it up somehow, that he would fail at it. And I'm like, oh my God, was your life saved by your own depression? He said, yeah, my life was saved by the thing that drove me all the way to it. He yanked me back at the last minute.
Yeah, right.
Well, I miss Seattle, Bill. I miss the normal things like Dick's Drive-In, the preposterous amount of chicken teriyaki atop a big wad of rice.
Yes.
That doesn't happen anywhere else, it turns out.
Yeah. The sticky rice is yours. There's plenty of it, John. So please eat some of this. I can't eat all of it.
Yeah, no, it's I miss the food and the friends.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in that order. Because here we do have hot dish, and I guess that'll have to do.
I've heard.
Until we can meet again. All right, Bill, thank you so much.
John, it's great to see you, and truly I appreciate what you're doing. And if it's okay for a normie to say so, and I don't know if it is, we talked about this on a KOW podcast. You actually did inspire me, because I think that everybody ought to have a therapist, and I'm not claiming I have a membership in the Depression Club. But since I have some extra time, I didn't let the fact that I can't see a therapist in person stop me from hiring one over the phone. Because I've got stuff, and I'm really enjoying it. And
wow.
Anyway, I just think you're hilarious and talented and brave as well. So thanks for doing all you do, John.
All right, thanks for the career, Bill. See you later.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so Bill and I used to work on a show called Rewind, which some of you might remember. And I literally went, scheduled a meeting with Bill, not knowing him at all, just saying like, hey, I'm a comedy writer and I got some ideas. And then I met with him and we kicked around some ideas. He didn't know that I wasn't really a writer to that point. I had never been calling myself a writer, but it turns out, as I say in the book, when you start calling yourself a writer, they don't check. There's no certification. They just wade you right on through. Now, speaking of writers who are real writers who I adore, I'm so honored that this person is with me all the way from Texas. Let's bring in Jenny Lawson. Oh, Jenny. Hi.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay!
These things are so
unmuted.
I see that a vast assortment of spooky dolls have joined you, and they're lingering over your shoulder.
They're my little sweet babies, and I love them. People either think they're super creepy or super adorable, and I think they're creepily adorable. It's my favorite.
Nice. And I'd be remiss if I didn't allow you to introduce your llama friend.
This is Fleece Witherspoon, who died of natural causes. And I keep her up here because the cats don't like her. And so if I keep her right here, the cats won't jump. Otherwise, they would be everywhere. So she stays here whenever I'm talking to people.
Now, Jenny, I loved our chats that we've had on the show. And I've been telling people, like, this is as much her book as mine, because you're all the way up here and I'm all the way down here. Have you gotten like, I wanted to say unusual responses from listeners and fans, but I know that most of the ones that you get are somewhat unusual and are often taxidermied objects. Have you heard from people after you were on our show, and what did they say?
I did. It was such a great experience, and it was so nice. And what's really funny is so many people have been like, oh my gosh, you have to read this book. It's called The Hilarious World of, and I was like, Depression. And they're like, yes, oh, it's so good. And I was like, yeah, look on the cover again. I'm right there saying that I agree with you. But you are right. It's
on
a
the
very
front
good
cover
book.
and on the back cover too.
Yay!
They're twice.
Now,
Now,
it's funny because so you had asked me to get back before the plague hit. You had asked me to come and come in person, and we were going to do
a big thing at the Fitzgerald. Yeah.
Yes, but then I ended up saying no because I was like, that just seems. I'm not sure where I'm going to be mentally, and so even though it's terrible that we're having to deal with this, this sort of is the only way that I probably could have done this. So maybe the plague worked in our favor for once.
Every time I ask you to do something, Jenny, it's like a little baby turtle trying to get to the sea. And so I figure if there's just enough of them, most of them will get eaten by birds, but 2 or 3 of them will make it and go swimming away. I wanted to ask you because, when I sat down to kind of write about okay, I've now been hired to write a book mostly about myself. What all do I include? And I ended up writing I think 180,000 words before I went back and removed most of them. How do you go about deciding what you're going to share of yourself, what you're going to keep behind the fence, and what is it about your own life that other people will say, yes, I relate to this? What's the thought process?
Well, typically I really struggle with writing. I know there are a lot of people who are like, there's no such thing as writer's block. It's just being lazy. But I guess I'm lazy because I really struggle. And I have a really hard time when I write about myself. Almost always I hate it, and then I go back and I delete it. So I would say probably people see 5% of what I really share. I am very careful about what I share about the stuff that is not necessarily my story. So maybe my family and this and that, they have a big say in what goes in there and what doesn't. But I have always been surprised that the things that I write that I'm like, oh, nobody is going to get this. Nobody's going to think this is funny, or nobody's going to relate. Those are the ones that people are like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person. So it's always, it's always really, really nice. And what's helpful is even when I'm dealing with depression, which I am actually, I stuck to a theme and brought my depression with me today because I'm kind of having a bit of an episode myself right now. But what's really nice is I can talk about what it really feels like and know that people, even if they don't understand it, they'll still say, oh, that sucks.
Mm.
And it's kind of lovely to be able to have sorry, my depression shows up as a brain fog. But to be able to have that way to vent, when I'm in a really down place, and today I sort of was, and I get this thing where I feel like my face is really heavy, and I'm having like right now to really focus on like keep all the muscles in your face working.
Yeah.
And so today I went outside and I was like, I need to be able to just like be myself for a second. So I went outside and I got a little waterer, and I was like, I'm just gonna pretend that I'm like watering the cantaloupes outside, and I just stood there, and my daughter was watching me from the window, and she came out and she was like, you've just been standing here for 5 minutes staring at the fence. And I was like, oh my God,
I'm watering.
sorry, I was watering, and I started thinking of things, and luckily she's 15, so she's old enough that she's like, yeah, I think it's more than that, but it's okay. And
Yeah. Well, you look very presentable. You got lipstick on. That's
I have
congratulations.
lipstick is the one piece of makeup that I'm wearing, and I'm wearing also, you know what? I'm wearing fake hair. I so recommend this. This is $10. It's called like a miracle wire or something. That way you don't even have to like wash your hair.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
I gotta start doing that.
Oh my God, it's ridiculous, and I super love it. Yeah. But you know what is really nice is when at the very first part, when you were talking about searching for hope, and you said that, and I started crying a little, and my depression doesn't let me cry. I feel nothing, like numbness. So the fact that I was crying a little bit actually gives me a lot of hope that I'm about to come out. That by tomorrow, I think I'll be okay again.
Well, Jenny, you're such an inspiration to me and to so many other people. Like you're one of these people, like you know, that women especially have this thing I've noticed where if you mention Jenny Lawson or Brene Brown, you can get them very, very enthused.
I love her. Oh my gosh.
A lot of people love you. And before you go, I'm wondering if you could do me one favor, which is to take that hair extension and wear it as a ZZ Top beard.
Oh my God, I could totally do that.
You're in Texas. Yes.
This is 100% full on Texas. Oh, I look like Willie Nelson, kind of.
Yeah, I thought it would be ZZ Top, but it's Willie Nelson or John Turturro in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh my God, that is exactly what it is. Oh, and it covers my neck too. This is lovely. This is my new look. So thank you for making me cry, and thank you for giving me my new look. You're
And
the
now
best.
you can FaceTime people and say, I'm doing fine.
And they wouldn't even question it. They'd be like, yeah, that seems normal for you.
Jenny, we'll meet in Meet Space one day, and I look forward to it.
All right. Bye, friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye. What a joy. Can you believe it? Jenny Lawson. Oh boy. Yeah, as we watch you, you're upbeat and engaging. I just saw that one, and we'll have more questions here in a bit. That one just caught my eye because today was a really rough day, and I think talking to heroes is always a good thing. In my experience, always meet your heroes, because most of the time it turns out great. So we'll get to more questions here in a minute. But speaking of heroes, my dear friend from the South Puget Sound is with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Neko Case, who will appear somehow on a computer screen near us. Here she comes.
Can you
Neko.
hear me?
Hi.
Can you hear?
I can hear you now.
Yes. Yes.
How are
Sorry.
you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much for having me.
I think we should do it like every night, just kill
I'm
an
okay
hour.
with that. Oh,
know.
I think I would be a happier person all around. Pretty
How's
much.
Vermont?
It's pretty dreamy. There's a lot of ticks and black flies right now, but other than that, it's pretty fun.
Are you in mud season right now? I've heard about the Vermont
Oh
mud season.
no, we're way past that.
Okay.
That was kind of early March this year.
Okay. And I asked you before we went on if you ever haunted the U bookstore, and you said that once in a while you did get there.
I did, yes. I did,
Okay.
yes. I didn't have a lot of money, but I really liked going in bookstores, so I did indeed.
I wonder, and maybe people watching and chatting can tell me, like, I get sad when I think that Seattle might not be weird anymore. That it got too fancy and expensive and crowded to be eccentric and vaguely damaged like it was. Do you remember that, Seattle?
Yeah, I do. And, right around 1992, like 2 million of the greediest people in the world moved there at once, and then everybody complained that it was raining, and that's when I noticed there was something harsh going on.
Yeah.
And now it's really not the same place, but it's somebody else's place. But at the same time, like, I think a lot about being sentimental, and I try not to do that, because as a person who is not indigenous, my sentimentality is just, it doesn't really mean anything. And sentimentality, for white people often becomes kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a thing you really got to look at and go, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, no,
I do miss those days, and I do miss a lot of the places, but what you gonna do?
You grew up in was it in Olalla or near Olalla? I can't remember.
I lived in Olalla. I lived in Gig Harbor, Purdy.
Yeah.
Ugh, all over.
People have sometimes.
Olalla was pretty good.
Yeah. People have asked me about music and about depression in the Pacific Northwest, and I always give them the kind of, feels like sort of a pat answer, like, well, when the weather's like it is and it's murky, of course it's sad and there's nothing else to do, so you go into a garage and you start a band.
Yeah.
Do you think like anything with your mental health was shaped by like the weather and the topography and the kind of murk of that Gig Harbor, South Pierce County kind of?
Well, I mean, I lived all over Washington State, and Tacoma is kind of my home, but there were areas that I had more of a depressed time at than others, but they were situational. They weren't weather related. I definitely I feel really comfortable with that gray low ceiling. I actually really like it.
Yeah, what do you like about it?
It's not a very common thing, but I really do love it.
Yeah, why do you love it? What is it about it?
I don't know, you feel cozy, like you're not shaking some response, like you're not building your cabin outside or something, or like something you were supposed to be doing. You're not making something that you were supposed to do that is making sure that you're not fulfilling your potential or something. I don't know. Yeah. There was a guilt that sort of weather assuaged or something.
Yeah, I always felt like
productivity guilt.
Yeah, that August nice weather that you'd sometimes get in the Northwest, I always felt like, oh, if I don't go do something with this, then I'm a failure, but I really want to stay in and read a book instead. Yeah.
And it's like, when is it going to get dark so that I won't be, kind of on the hook for getting something done? I don't know.
Right. How are you doing during the pandemic and the lockdown and the everything that goes with that? You're
not productive. I'm not productive. I'm having a pretty okay time. I definitely am very aware that I'm very lucky to live out in the middle of nowhere during this time.
Yeah.
Things don't seem super different, except that all of my work has been canceled. So that part is scary. So right now I'm kind of doing a lot of pretending that stuff is normal, like not letting myself think about it, which is super unhealthy, I'm sure. I'll pay for it somewhere. I'm just not sure where yet.
Do you need that balance, do you find, of like stay in and record for a while, stay at home and rest for a while, go out on tour for a while? Do those always need to be in sync?
Well, there's something about knowing that there's work in the future, like all of my touring for the year has been canceled, and that's where I make money. Like, it's not recording, or there's no other part of my job that makes money except touring.
Yeah.
So it's a little scary, and like the bad things that can happen because of that haven't happened yet. Like,
Okay.
I haven't lost my house that I already lost once, so I don't know. There's a lot not happening, but you know, I'm just gonna go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel guilty because there's so many times I've been out on the road and I'm never home where I'm just like, God, I would cut off my pinky to see an entire year in one place, to see seasons change. And so I've gotten a bit of that, and I've really been diving in and making sure that I really appreciate everything.
That's great. Can you work like on your own on music? Because I know, you know, with your band that I've seen you with, you know, you're very tight and you're very, very synced up. I can't imagine getting a lot done through Zoom in a situation like that.
Well, the meeting parts work really good, but next week there's going to be a bit of the Zoom music checking out, I think, and I'm a little scared of it. So I'm sure that once I try it, it'll be fine, you know, but until that time, I'm going to be like, like doing any stupid, you know, project, or I better, you know, shave the dogs or whatever it is. I think I have, like, I better clean out that weird Eve on the front. I don't know, just whatever dumb thing that I was supposed to do on some to-do list 5 years ago. It becomes the most important thing in the world.
Where are you in your house right now? I can't figure out the grating behind.
I'm in my bedroom, which is kind of this space up next to the ceiling because only part of the house is left. So it's like a little platform up near the ceiling. It's like a little lofty area.
Okay.
It does look pretty weird.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cozy up here. It's very
Good.
hot right now, but.
And how's Joan, your dog?
She's right next to me.
Oh, can I see Joan?
Let me see if I can get Joan on the camera there.
Oh, yay!
I just pulled a porcupine quill out of her because she got into one the other day because she's an asshole. And so yeah.
I often just imagine the lives of animals that live where you live. Because I remember one time you tweeted about how you were just sitting by the fire, picking off ticks and throwing them into the fire as you.
I picked one off me and threw it into the fire today. I basically live like people pretend chimpanzees live like. I'm just always picking some sort of parasite off of me or someone else in a relaxing repose. But also drinking like a hot chocolate at the same time. Like I'm a wealthy degenerate who just doesn't care.
Or like you're old money wealthy and like you've gone insane up in the woods.
Yeah. The Kleenex boxes on the feet, you know, that kind of stuff.
Boiling the rainwater for tea.
I actually do use rainwater for stuff.
Do you? Awesome.
And it's that I've come to that. Definitely.
Well, it forms the entire. I have a nephew at UVM in Vermont, but I've never been to Vermont. So all I think about when I think of Vermont is Bernie Sanders, you and various ticks, and my nephew riding a bicycle. And so it sounds like a really interesting place.
All those things happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, yeah, you know, you think of Vermont in that cartoonish kind of way, but like if you go somewhere, you will actually see Bernie Sanders. He literally, like, I've gone to catch a flight or be coming in from a flight, and he will literally be like, with his briefcase, waving at everybody at the flight desk and just going through to catch his flight alone without
a bottle of maple syrup. Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, it's not that far from the truth.
Okay.
But you're totally invited
Okay, cool.
when this business is over,
Well,
when this business is done.
you know my daughter Kate, and she'll probably want to take you.
Oh, I was going to ask about Kate. How's she doing?
She's good. She's staring down the barrel of a senior year that she hopes will start on time, and then she'll be wrapping that up, and then she can't wait to move as far away from us as possible, which will be good.
Maybe she'll move in next to me.
Okay, I'll send her
How
over.
about you? Just at least get her into UVM.
Okay, all right,
Come on,
that's where
Kate.
she wants to go. All right, Neko, I love you.
I
Bye-bye.
love you too, and I've really enjoyed everything everybody said. And
Yay.
thanks for talking about things like depression and suicide, like they're real things. Because you know how in the movies, there's the guy who's burning alive, and he has a friend out in the crowd, and he's like, he looks at them, and they're like, okay, and then they shoot an arrow into him.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of what being depressed is like. You're like, I'm on fire right now. If somebody could just,
Shoot me that.
could you be the guy who just shot an arrow? Like, it is funny. And if
Much
we
more-
didn't have suicide as a valve, like, our lives would suck. We wouldn't be able to go anywhere. It keeps me alive.
Okay, that's such a more vivid illustration with the arrows than Groucho Marx, so I hand it to you.
Oh, it's all valid.
All right, thanks, Neko.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Love you. Bye.
Let's see. So I think we're going to have Terry come back with any questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and load them up into the chat room, and Terry's going to kind of moderate that. See, Terry, this is why, like, I'm a writer, and I can, and I make jokes, and I talk about Groucho Marx, but you got to leave it to a Neko case to get the flaming arrow into the chest of a person already on fire. That's why the Neko cases of the world are so valuable.
I love it, John. It's all of this just reminds me of the good old days of very live TV, where who cares? Off you go.
I mean, this whole tour has been great because I've been like, I forget right as soon as I start bringing people out, I forget that I'm doing a bookstore event because I am in my closet, and I'm just catching up with old friends. So hopefully it entertains and enlightens along the way.
Me too. I got to tell you, John and Neko and Bill and Jenny, I'm really humbled by you guys. I've done a lot of author interviews and conversations over the years, and you get to my heart.
Oh,
and I think that's great. And I think it's great for all of us who get to watch this or maybe see the recording someday. So I can't thank you enough. I really can't thank you enough. We do have some questions. And one of them, to start right off, we all know this, John, you refed at the beginning about Minneapolis, St. Paul, and man, it's like as a people, we're under a sledgehammer with the shootings, with the murders, with this virus, and with a population that seems to be at each other's throats. And I can't think of three worse triggers for depression and anxiety than those.
Yeah.
What have you noticed?
I've noticed that the world is starting to mirror the world that depressed people have seen for a long time. So the idea that there is a deadly threat around the corner is not new to people like us. And I should say I've received very good treatment, and I'm on a schedule of medication that works well for me, but I still know the depressed world pretty well. And the idea of that ever-present threat, the idea that other people represent potential harm, and that those are a lot of things that are familiar. And so what I'm hearing is people with depression often have some tools, like they might have gone to therapy and learned the patterns that their brains get into. They might have gotten used to saying, okay, here's something that's really bad, let's trace back to the root of it, and figure out what's causing it. Or this is really bad, let's not make this color everything the same bad color. And so I think it's the normies now who are out buying sweatpants for the first time, who are kind of new to this. It doesn't make it any better, but there's at least for some of us, there's some tools for how to deal with it, which takes some of the edge off.
There really are. So talk about the normies and saddies, not just in these times, but at any time. How can normies help saddies? And
just bring them dinner every night, luxurious fur coats. No, I mean, what I usually say is to try to understand that, and I referenced this in the section that I read, that it's not the same as depression, the emotion. It's a tough word because it means a clinical disorder, it means an emotion, and those are two different things. It means like a tropical, just below a hurricane is called a tropical depression. Like there's so many words for it. There's so many meanings for that same word. But to recognize that it's not something that is mood-based, So if you watch a funny movie and you're no longer depressed, you didn't have a clinical depression, which is what I write about. You didn't have a disorder. If your team lost the big game and you're sad about that, you're not depressed about that. You're having an understandable and normal response. You're healthy. It's the line is always, I'm not the first person to use it, but to say, just go for a walk and you'll feel better is like saying, just go for a walk and that leukemia will clear right up. Just if you smiled more, you wouldn't have such diabetes. It makes no more sense with depression. And so, it's people's instinct to want to help and even to want to solve a problem comes from a place of caring, if not love. But it can be very frustrating when it's seen as just something that you can let roll off.
Mm-hmm. John, you talked earlier, about addiction and depression.
Mm-hmm.
Are they inexorably linked, or are there addictions that don't involve depression, or vice versa?
I mean, I don't know a lot about addiction. I haven't been through a recovery program. I have friends who are very active in those fields, and I had a colleague who I worked on this show with who's a recovering alcoholic, and she's the one who told me, that you're not, if you're wondering whether someone is depressed in order to decide whether to book them, but they're an addict, go ahead and book them because there's something to that. What I do know is that depression doesn't ride alone. Hardly ever. It's not a solo act. It's part of a band. And so in almost all of my interviews, there's been some co-occurring thing, usually an anxiety disorder, often an obsessive compulsive disorder. There's often post-traumatic stress. There could be a lot of things. There's in women especially, there's so often an eating disorder, and these things co-occur, and they make it even harder to untangle that web, and so it's hard to separate. But usually, I find that if there's a depressive disorder, there's something else in there too.
Do people? Can you go back and forth between being a normie and a saddie?
Well, I mean, the term major depressive disorder, which is, the technical diagnostic term for having a problem with depression. A friend of mine said, that term major depressive disorder is mostly an insurance term. It's mostly like why you're going to see somebody, why you're getting meds, why you're making appointments. And it's something that people can understand. And so but I just had Mike Birbiglia on our podcast, And he said, I've never been diagnosed with depression. But at the same time, I notice how in a lot of his solo shows, his monologues, he will talk about, well, you know, I'm hard to be with. I'm kind of messy. I'm incapable of feeling joy. And this one time, and then he just rolls right past it. And so the show was all about me saying, hold on, let's get back to that. And in Mike's case, he has never had a professional say out loud, you have a depressive disorder, but he does have a darkness that interferes with his life, a persistent cloud that makes it hard to get things done in the way he'd like to get them done. And that's the definition of a disorder. And so, you know, I've met a lot of people who have something in them that is getting in the way and that they've had to address it. And to me, as a storyteller on the radio or on the podcast, that's what's really interesting to me, is that struggle of the person against the obstacle. I mean, it's sort of the classic story formula. And it's, you know, in the book, it's a variety of struggles that I come across.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, there are times, like, there's nothing in my book about going to Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, because even though I had some tough times there, it was generally great. You know, I loved it. and so there are times, big stretches at times there where I felt like a normie, where I didn't even think about this other thing. But, you know, if you ignore it, it doesn't go away, it just waits.
Mhm. So how do you see depression? Is it an opponent? Is it a nemesis? Or is it part of you? It's just there.
I describe it in the book as a very close friend who wants to kill me. It's, you know, it's there. I do like to personalize it, you know, and in order to understand what it is outside of me, so I can understand it as a separate entity. But it's something that's always, I think, going to be there. But I've learned to manage it. You know, certain, like, times like these, that's put to the test. But for the most part, it's something that wants to lie to me, wants to warp my brain, and wants to show me a thing other than reality. And so then it's incumbent upon me to know when that's happening, to say, oh, okay, I see what it's getting me toward. I see this pattern. I see this way of thinking. And so I need to go to work and redirect those thoughts. And I do that by understanding where they came from, you know, which often does go way back to childhood, and say, okay, that's where that's coming from. How can I apply a logic to this? And so it's sort of, it's just knowing what the opponent is likely to do, and then being ready for it.
John, I'm going to read you a question that came in just a bit ago. And I've heard this same concern by several people. And, you know, I'm thinking the same thing. My biggest source of anxiety right now is thinking about things opening and needing to go back to the office. Working from home and not engaging in the social life in the office has been such a relief.
Yeah. Not technically a question, but
That's okay. I'm good.
but certainly a statement I can respond to. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way in a lot of ways. You know, I write in the book about this kind of cult of the office and the cult of labor. I write about it in the chapter where I worked at Amazon.com, of, you know, what used to maybe be religious fervor has now been replaced by this sort of yuppie fervor, for lack of a better word, of, like, you know, the harder you work, the more hours you put in, the more valuable you can make yourself appear to others, the better you are. When in fact, you're just falling for every manipulation that capitalism can offer.
Mhm.
I've found tremendous comfort in the new work setup that I've had here in my closet, as silly as that sounds, because I'll work for a while, I'll have lunch with my family, Maybe we'll do a jigsaw puzzle for a little while. I'll go back to work and then, get off at a reasonable hour and have time to walk the dogs and make dinner and clean up from dinner and watch some TV. And if nothing else is going on, I don't want to watch TV, I can go into the office and get a little more work done. So yeah, I mean, I've told my work that, come for me last, because I'm kind of enjoying it. Also because like even when I do big performances at somewhere like the Fitzgerald in St. Paul, we have 1,000 people there. I really enjoy the performances if I'm telling jokes or if I'm, whatever it is, acting. But mingling with people in the lobby afterwards just fills me with dread. It's these unrehearsed moments where you just need to kind of read the room and figure out where other people are coming from and what they're doing. Those stress me out. So the controlled situations like I might find at home are pretty great. So yeah, I am with the listener and viewer here, and but I will not be going to his or her home because that would be rude.
How about one more for you, and then we can let everybody get on with their evenings or nighttime if you're back on the East Coast. It's about, how do I describe this? What did you want to accomplish by writing the book? And I think by that I mean, what would be a good outcome? What would make you just happy?
It's kind of already happened. With this one, I decided that my goal was to think like this, and I'm working on that, and I'm doing pretty well. But I don't check the Amazon rankings. Somebody I think is going to send me sales figures here pretty soon. I'm sort of dreading it because there's nothing I could do about those things. And like, I'd love for it to be a bestseller, but it is already, the rights have recently been sold to the book in the nation of Slovakia. So there will be a Slovakian language edition.
All right.
Slovakia is, of course, the gateway to Montenegro. But honestly, it's really about affecting change with people and getting dialogue going. Like I said, I wanted to be the loudmouth, and I hear from people who are helped by this book, who feel understood, who are reading it out loud to their spouses, saying, this is what I've been telling you. And that's really what I wanted to do. I said in the pitch meeting when we were trying to get funding for the podcast way back when, I said, honestly, like it's too late for my brother. I can't save him, but somebody else's brother can be saved, or sister or mom or dad. And the only way that's going to happen is if more people start talking, if we treat it more like we did littering in the 70s or drunk driving in the 80s, if we just open it up in that same way. And I think the success of the show and the success so far of the book owes a lot of it to just the world being ready for it. I think it came along at a good time. I'm proud of what I do, but I think there was a hunger for it that I can serve. So that's really what I wanted to do. I've written books before, and I know just the god awful amount of work that's involved. And then, it goes out into the world, and then you see it at Half Price Books, like it's a hard job. It's a hard thing to do, but hearing from people already that it's helped them either in their own struggle or help them to understand somebody in their life who deals with this. I have a sister-in-law who read it and said, oh, I understand this a lot better now. And, who isn't affected by depression. And that was the goal.
Mm-hmm. John, thank you. This is
Thank you.
It's been an honor for us at the bookstore, University Bookstore, to have you with us, and Bill and Jenny and Neko. What a great evening.
I think we're going to start a band.
Well, can I do something? I used to play the drums.
Okay, cool.
So my parents pretty much wanted to throw me out of the house, but
Yeah.
That's what kids do, you know?
We'll
Thank
just
you.
Neko sing, and the rest of us will just hide and listen to her.
There you go. There you go. One more time, folks. It's called The Hilarious World of Depression. There it is. And University Bookstore, you can get it from us, ubookstore.com. As
You
I
have
said,
9 nameplates too, don't you?
yes, we do. We have signed nameplates. So we'll put one of those in there too.
Good.
And I'll give it my blessing. So that would be, you know, even more of a good thing.
Nice.
Thank you. Oh,
All
and
right.
over there in chat right now, everybody, is the link to the bookstore and this book. So before we run away, click fast and you can sign up. But I can't say thanks enough, John.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the tour and the book. And I hope we get to talk again someday.
We will. All right.
Good night, and good night, everybody. And thank you so much for being with us. Much appreciated.